The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you.
Jesus proposed another parable to the crowds, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came and sowed weeds all throughout the wheat, and then went off. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the householder came to him and said, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?' He answered, 'An enemy has done this.' His slaves said to him, 'Do you want us to go and pull them up?' He replied, 'No, if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until harvest. Then at harvest time I will say to the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn.' He proposed another parable to them. 'The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, yet when full grown, it is the largest of plants. It becomes a large bush, and the birds of the sky come and dwell in its branches.' He spoke to them another parable. 'The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch was leavened.' All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. He spoke to them only in parables to fulfill what had been said through the prophets. 'I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce what is laid hidden from the foundation of the world.' Then, dismissing the crowds, he went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field.' He said in reply, 'He who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed, the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Just as weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all who cause others to sin and are evildoers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears ought to hear.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Whoever has ears ought to hear. There must be some importance to this. In the last couple of 3 weeks, since the 1st of July, I've been doing lots of traveling, some for family, some for church. I got some more to do. This week I'm going to Atchison, Kansas. I'm also going to Stillwater to do a retreat for Holy Family Cathedral. And so I've been traveling a lot. And one of the things I noticed when I went back to western Kansas, where my mother grew up, is that there was wheat still in the field. This has never happened before. I've never gone there the second week of July and seen wheat. It's always been harvested, maybe even a week or a week and a half before I get there. And the other thing I noticed is these beautiful weeds in the middle of the wheat fields. Because they've had a lot of rain there, just like we've had rain, not enough to fill our lakes till a few days ago, right? But we've had rain and all our grass is really nice and green. The weeds were just growing like crazy in western Kansas. You don't have to plant weeds, they just come up, right? They're in the middle of everything. So I talked to one of my cousins who's a farmer, and I said, so tell me about this. And he talked about the rain and how there were patches in the fields that were ripe, but other patches that were still green, so they couldn't go in and harvest. And then by the time the others was ready to harvest, then the rains came, and then the weeds started growing. And weeds are a part of life, aren't they? We have weeds in our own lives. We have distractions. We have sinfulness. We have temptations. We have that knothead brother or sister-in-law. We have that kid or that parent that doesn't do what we want them to do, or even the spouse, right? We see that sometimes as weeds. But Jesus gives this understanding of weeds a totally different picture for us. Because in this context of this story, the weeds are those who are the sons and daughters of the evil one. The wheat is good. You and I should be wheat. That's what we want to do. We are created to be wheat. We are created to do the things, to grow a harvest of glory and praise for our God. That's what we're created to do. And then he likens the kingdom of heaven to the mustard seed. This smallest of seed, he calls it. And it grows into a large bush. What is that? And then he likens the kingdom of heaven to yeast put in to make the dough rise, to leaven the bread. These small things that have an impact. The weeds, they're small sometimes they're great, but they have an impact on how we live, the distractions of life. Again, the temptations, the things we have. We must pay attention to them. Because if we don't pay attention to the weeds, they will take over. And they will rule our lives. All of a sudden, we're living for the weeds rather than living for the wheat. But it's the same in the kingdom of heaven. The mustard seed, this smallest of seeds. You're here at Mass today. Let's talk about this Mass being a mustard seed in your life. Let's talk about this Mass being yeast to leaven the bread of your life. It's very small. It's only 1 hour of this whole week. We got 7 days in the week, 24 hours a day. Somebody do the math, lots of hours, right? And we're taking 1 hour to come here. It's very small. But if that is the seed of God's love and mercy and grace that is planted in your heart, what can the harvest be from that? It's like the kingdom of heaven. And then what do? We come back next week, don't we? And we come back to Mass. And it's another seed planted. It's a little more piece of yeast put into us. And then the next week. And some of us has been coming for Mass for a long time. We got white hair, right? We got lots of seeds in us of the kingdom of heaven. And maybe that's why we're still coming back. Because we created this habit. We created this understanding. We created the lifestyle of living for God at least 1 hour a week. Now here's the kicker to this. There's a lot more hours that you could do things that would be seed for the kingdom of God. Like each day, a little prayer. Doesn't have to be much. Could be a little bit. I invite people sometimes who come to confession or talk to me about issues and say, I just don't pray enough, Father. And I says, well, tell me about your prayer. And we talk about it. And usually when they think I don't pray enough, they think I don't say enough novenas, I don't do enough rosaries, which is good prayer. I'm not cutting it down. But I say, well, do you talk to God? What do you mean, Father? Do you talk to God and say, God, I'm having a hard time at work today. God, I'm having a difficult time dealing with one of my customers or one of my family. Or I'm really feeling temptation in this area, and I'm trying to do the right thing, but it's really tough, God. Are you talking to God? Because that's what prayer is conversation with God. Sometimes it's in a formal manner, out of a book or off of a pamphlet or a rosary. Sometimes it's formal. Sometimes it needs to be informal. God, I'm having this challenge. God, I've got this beautiful joy today. This morning, I'm giving thanks to God out here as I'm standing outside welcoming you in, because it's the middle of July and I can stand outside and not be sweating profusely at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. To me, that's a gift. That's a beautiful Thanksgiving. Will it be hotter today? Yes. And in the week, yes. But today, right now, that's the kingdom of heaven planted in my heart, being thankful to God. That's the yeast. That's the mustard seed. The weeds are the stuff that distract us from that. Too much TV, too much social media, too much watching things I shouldn't watch, too much reading things I shouldn't watch, too much allowing maybe anger in my heart or frustration or impatience to rule who I am. That's the weeds. And if it goes unchecked, they just keep growing and they keep growing and they keep growing. And then it's hard. And talking to my cousin, how's it going to be cutting the wheat with that much weeds in it? He says it's going to be tough. Because usually they just cut wheat. And the combine just processes this wheat through the combine. Beautiful grain bins full of this golden, nutritious stuff that will end up being bread and pie crust and cake and all those good things that I love, you know. But when there's weeds in it, you got to adjust the machine so it takes the weeds out. You got to make sure those weeds don't get into the, you know. And it takes more. And the wheat doesn't bring as much money because, they look in there and they do tests. They say, you've got 2% weeds in your wheat, so we can't give you full price. That's how it works. And the weeds will grow. The weeds will grow. The weeds will grow automatically. Why? Because the evil one fertilizes them and waters them in our lives. He even entices us. Oh, that's a good weed. That's a great weed. Oh, you want that weed. Doesn't that weed bring pleasure? But then after we experience those weeds, what happens? We feel guilty. We feel shame. We come back to Mass, we pray, and we go, wow, I spent a lot of time this week in the weeds. I didn't spend any time with my mustard seed or my yeast. That's what you take to God in prayer. God, I spent a lot of time this week in the weeds. Help me ignore the weeds. Help me deal with the weeds, but don't let me live in the weeds. Help me receive your grace. Help me allow the yeast, which is your word and your love, help to knead me, to leaven me. Allow me to grow like the mustard seed into something that gives you glory and gives you peace. Allow me, God. That's prayer. You may not think it's prayer. It's prayer. It's just as valid as a prayer as praying a rosary. It depends on the moment. That's the beauty of our relationship with God. That's the beauty. There was one line. The Spirit comes to the aid of our weakness. That's in the second reading. Because sometimes we don't know what to pray, but the Spirit can plant seeds for us. The smallest of the seeds becomes the largest of the plants. The yeast leavens the whole loaf. That's God's mercy and love. May we be receptive to that. May we not let the weeds take over in the fields of our hearts.